Hi, church. Have you ever been in the home of someone who knows how to do hospitality well? When I was in seminary, my roommates and I made a trip up the coast. I love long car rides, particularly through places like Big Sur or along the Oregon coast. But one of the things that made the trip just the most memorable experience was the hospitality of my roommates, friends, and family. At each stop, it was like they were on a mission to outdo the preceding host's hospitality. Now, as great as it was, my sense is that it pales in comparison to the experience in the first century. I mean, think of the Apostle Paul's weariness as he traveled, the uncertainty of what he found in each town or village that he came upon. Now imagine the joy of finding a small community of believers faithful to Christ's teaching. Their welcome embrace and the relief to spend a few days for rest, renewal, and for fellowship before moving on. In Acts 21, Luke tells us when they, that is he, Luke, and Paul and their companions with them arrived in Caesarea. It says, leaving the next day, we reached Caesarea and stayed at the house of Philip the evangelist, one of the seven. He had 4 unmarried daughters who prophesied. We'll look more at this passage sometime off in the future, but as we come upon the story of Philip in Acts 8, I can't but think ahead to this time when he and Luke no doubt sat by the fire for several nights, and Philip shared stories of God's work following the great persecution and all that God had done him years before in Samaria and beyond. What Luke tells us in this section, we assume came right from that time spent with Philip himself. Now, Philip had been introduced previously, like Stephen, as someone who was ordained or appointed to oversee the distribution of food. He wasn't an apostle. What he was faithful and responsive to the powerful spirit that moved in him. Luke tells us that Philip went down to a city in Samaria and proclaimed the Messiah there. Does that raise a flag for any of you? Samaria is north of Jerusalem, not south. Is Luke confused? Is this an error? Well, no. And for starters, geographically, Jerusalem, particularly the temple, was at a higher elevation than Samaria. So in a sense, you would have to go down to Samaria. But there's more to it. The temple in Jerusalem was believed to be the spiritual epicenter, the high point or navel of the world, at least from the Jews' point of view. So when the Israelites pilgrimaged to the city, to Jerusalem for various festivals, they often sang what are called Psalms of Ascent. They ascended towards God's holy presence in the temple. And to travel the other direction would not just be a physical descent, but also a spiritual descent away from that presence. Of course, Stephen disproved that in his dying sermon, but that we'll save that for another day. When the crowds heard Philip and saw the signs he performed, they all paid close attention to what he said. For with shrieks, impure spirits came out of many, and many who were paralyzed or lame were healed. So there was great joy in the city. I'll bet. In the Gospels, Jesus performed these signs and wonders to demonstrate that God's kingdom had come upon them. But here, God's kingdom had not just come to Jerusalem, not just Judea. It's come to Samaria, which was the former region of the northern kingdom of Israel. Through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, God's kingdom didn't just pertain to the southern kingdom, the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. The expansion, it expanded to Samaria, which represented an incorporation of the lost tribes of Israel. It's as if God had picked up where he left off. None of God's promises would be left unfulfilled. Even Samaria, the sworn enemies of of the Jews were welcomed back into the kingdom as citizens, but also as family, as brothers and sisters. I pray that we would follow Philip's example of faithfulness and responsiveness to follow the Spirit's leading, even when the Spirit leads us down to where we would rather not go, and to those with whom we would rather not share, that they might become kingdom citizens with us and restored to God's forever family. God bless, church.